Hello chess friends and welcome to the Rhd1 Chess channel and welcome to the Magnus Carlsen Chess Tour finals in 2020. We are now in the semi-finals of this very nice tournament, and four of the best players are participating. It's of course Magnus Carlsen himself, Ding, Liren, Daniil, Dubov and Hikaru Nakamura. If we watched really this 2020 so far, these four players have played really the best chess. Nepo maybe also played some great games, but really Daniil, Dubov with winning one of the tournaments of the Magnus Carlsen Grand Chess Tour, Hikaru Nakamura with a great performance against Magnus Carlsen himself, Ding Liren also with great tournaments, although maybe Ding Liren didn't play a good tournament, the last tournament that Magnus Carlsen has organized, but here these four are really now the top elite grandmasters, and they're battling for the throne of this very nice tournament. So in the first game, I wanted to show you the match game between Magnus Carlsen and Ding Liren. Here it's the game from the round 1, in which Ding had to play with the white pieces and Magnus played with the black pieces. This match game was really an intense one, as we had really some ups and downs. This was a brutal match game, so be prepared. This is really something else in chess. So let's start with the round 1, and as always we start with the fight. Here e4 played by Ding Liren, c5 by Magnus, knight to f3, d6, d4, c takes d, knight takes d, knight to f6 and knight to c3. So far the Sicilian. After the move a6, Magnus plays the Najdorf defense, Najdorf Sicilian, and in the finals between Jan Nepomniachtchi and Magnus Carlsen, Nepo played this move h3, and I've explained these ideas and the differences between the h3 and f3 move. In my opinion, this f3 is much more powerful. It leads into a normal attack for white. What the ideas for both sides are, of course, that black is probably going to castle on the king side, white is probably going to castle on the queen side, and then you start to attack your opponent on that side where he has castle. So this is really the so-called opposite side attack game, in which you have to be fast in order to make something happen. Here e6 played by Magnus. He plays this chevening setup, and this chevening setup is a restriction idea of blacks, which of course controls this 4 centralized squares here on the board. It's not allowing some maybe knight jumps, maybe some minor piece activities on that squares. And also as a strategical idea, black could try, of course, a pawn breakthrough with the move d5. So in the game bishop to e3, still now common theory. In the game h5, and here Magnus plays this preventing idea, because as I said, black wants to castle here on the king side, and you want to block your opponent's attack. Of course, black will probably, white will probably make a progress at least in one particular moment of the game, but at least you can stop his attack. The idea is simply to slow down the attack. And when I talked with a very great friend of mine, Bogdan Lalic, he's a grandmaster from Croatia, he told me something really weird about the Najdorf Sicilian. He told me that he is playing the Najdorf and he had really great success. For instance, he beat Alexei Shirov in the Najdorf as black, but what he told me, that you cannot choose just to play the Najdorf, because the Najdorf can be really a simplified line for white. And you see now how Ding Liren will use the common weaknesses in black's position. First, the weaknesses are, of course, the weak pawn on d6, the weak square on b6. So these are our targets. And also this g4 is sort of a strategical idea with which we, of course, are trying to crack the position. A potential h3 doesn't bring you so much. You cannot play g4 anyway, because there are tactical threat on the h file. But what black could do here is a potential h4 move, and black could really paralyze the king side and wouldn't have troubles at all on that side. So that's why here queen to d2 played by Ding, preparing simply queenside castling, bishop to e7 castling, and now b5. Magnus plays this very aggressive attack on the queen side, a3 played by Ding, bishop to d7, and now king to b1. Also common idea to simply improve the position of the king. You see Ding Liren plays real normal game. In the game knight to c6. What the idea behind this move is, of course, to prepare also a b4 pawn breakthrough. So that's why Ding Liren undermines the pressure with the move knight takes c6, and after bishop to c6 we have now bishop to f4. So as said, this is simply our clear target here. After move bishop to f4, we have a triple attack against the pawn on d6, and it forces now Magnus to play the move e5. But what Liren has accomplished here is now a new weakness, and we have now again the d6 weakness, but also the square d5, which is also weakness. If you try something like d5 in order to make a pawn breakthrough, then we can simply take bishop to f6 and then follow with knight to d5. So that's why you see black would love to improve the position of this backward pawn and play something like d5, but it's not possible so far. And here I believe white has a comfortable game. And that this sentence that Bogdan Lalic told to me came back to me, and this is really it. You cannot just play sometimes the knight off, because you see, I'm not sure how to proceed here from black's perspective. All of the pawns are a little bit advanced. There are many spaces, weaknesses that here white can use in black's position. So here after the move bishop to g5, the idea is clear. We want to undermine the pressure, and we want to take away the defenders of the key square d5, because that's the main weakness now in black's position. And of course the knight is the defender of the d5. So here after the move queen to b6, Ding plays bishop takes f6, a simple idea, bishop to f6, and now knight to d5. So what to do? If you retreat, then of course knight takes f6, followed with queen takes d6, and black is better, of course, so that's why Magnus has to take. Bishop takes d5, and here queen to d5. Okay, here white is slightly better, but there is one positional problem for white. White has this opposite color bishop, so if the position gets more and more simplified, then it's of course a drawish position. So here Magnus plays an interesting idea, but it's a good idea, king to e7, simply protecting the d6 pawn, and now trying to build here a very nice protection, and then maybe make something happen with rook to c8, maybe a5, b4 if the position allows it, and again counterattack here white on the queen side. But here Ding plays a very interesting idea, c4. Cracking the position in the game rook to c8. What Magnus is trying to simply open some files against white's king. Here we have c takes b5, and here rook to c5. But here queen to b3, simply playing now on our 2 versus 1 situation, because after a takes b5 we have a great attack here by white, because what we want to do is get use here of our pawn majority, go maybe now into a favorable endgame, in which we can create a pass pawn on the queen side, because it's hard for black to create a pass pawn here. Black still cannot advance the pawn on d5. As I said, black would really love to make that move, but so far it's not possible. And here a4. Risky idea by Ding, because there is some tension, of course, going on the b file, also on the c file. So here Ding is opening the position in front of the king, but it's a great idea. So far you cannot take, of course, because queen takes b6 will happen. If you try b4, then you get bishop to b5, and still you cannot protect anymore this pawn. This pawn is loose, so it's again a dangerous position here for black. We can simply take, then trying to prove somehow, maybe play something like queen to d3, followed then with b4. Then we would have 2 connected pass pawns, and it's game over then for black. So that's why Magnus played rook to c8. He activates another rook. We have bishop to b5, and we have now accomplished the position from an endgame's perspective. Still, if too many rooks are off the board, if the queen is off the board, still it's probably a draw because of this opposite color bishop situation. But Liren is finding a great way how to make something happen here. After the move bishop to g5, Magnus is desperately trying now to activate his bishop, but now rook to d3. We have h4, we have rook to d1, rook to c1, and now king to a2. After trades of rooks, we have bishop to f4, and now h3. Here Ding keeps, of course, all of his pawns on light squares. Then, of course, they cannot be attacked by the dark square bishop. We have bishop to e3, bishop to c4, queen to b3, king to b3. And now this is a good idea by Ding. He's now improving simply the position of the king. You have to use now your king in an endgame. Magnus tries bishop to d4. We have rook to d2, because the threat was, of course, rook to b8, followed with rook takes b2. Now f5 played by Magnus, and now rook to c2. We have f takes e4, and now Magnus is trying to get his king somehow into the game. But you see, Liren has a clear path here with the king. Still nothing can happen. If you try maybe something like bishop to c5, I think that rook to c5 is also a possibility, because after d takes c5, king takes c5, the king is a little bit far away, and still we can play b4, a5, a6, maybe bishop to c6, then b5, b6. So these two connected pass pawns are really an enormous strength on the queen side. They're really unstoppable now, so Magnus has to be careful. They are really these tactical threats with rook to c5. He has to stay with the bishop here on d4. Here in the game, king to g5, and now Ding simply pushed the pawn, and now rook to e2. Again, a very nice idea. You see this setup. Black cannot attack the rook on e2, so the rook is protecting perfectly fine everything here. In the game, rook to c8, and now a6. Ding is simply continuing to push the pawn, bishop to c5, king to a5. We have rook, bishop to a7, blocking the further advance of the pawn on the a file. We have b3, and now rook to c1, bishop to c4, rook to a1, and now simply king to b5. What the idea is, of course, now to play king to c6 and then king to b7. In the game, rook to b1. Now comes this idea: king to c6, bishop to c5, and now after king to b7 and rook to a1, Kira wanted to stop and try to find now the winning move. After that move, Magnus Carlsen resigned. So here, let's add a Mortal Kombat sound. So finish Magnus Carlsen, and try to find really a great move, which Ding of course saw. It's a great deflection motif, sort of. It's the move b4. So here, after the move b4, Magnus Carlsen immediately resigned, because if you take here, for instance, then we can simply push this pawn further. You cannot do something, and if you try bishop to d4, then you get a very tricky bishop to a2, locking here the connection, locking the a file, and again you would be forced probably to give up your bishop for the pawn, and still white is continuing with an extra pawn here on the queen side, so it's game over. I'm not sure what to say about this game. You see how the Najdorf can be sometimes really problematic opening if you don't play the move order correctly, if you make slight inaccuracies like Magnus did here. Ding didn't play anything special here. He simply occupied the weak d5 square, used his spaces, used his weaknesses in black's camp, and won the game with a great tactic in the end. So, okay, this, as I said, will be a very tense match game, because Ding is now in the lead. I hope really that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot, and we'll start now with our new playlist. I'll create now a separate playlist of this tournament, so we can follow more and more games. If you want to see more commented chess games from some other tournaments and from the previous Magnus Carlsen Grand Chess Tour tournament, here's also the link. And if you want to see the best chess games of all time, you can also check out my best chess games of all time series. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.